You are living in the middle of a missing persons case where the victim, the suspect, and the only witness are all you. It sounds like the plot of a low-budget psychological thriller, but it is the literal reality of your own existence. If you try to look back at the first 3 or 4 years of your life, you will find a wall of static. You were there, obviously. You ate, you cried, you learned to walk, and you likely had a favorite toy, maybe a blue plastic rattle with a tiny, jagged scratch on the handle from when you dropped it on the driveway. You possessed a name, a personality, and a rapidly expanding brain, yet that entire version of you has been systematically deleted. This isn't just a lapse in memory. This is a total blackout of the most formative era of your human experience, a phenomenon known as infantile amnesia. For decades, this was treated as a minor biological quirk, but when you start peeling back the layers, it looks much more like a heist. Someone or something stole your history. Does it bother you that the person you used to be is someone you've never actually met? The first major suspect in this mystery was a man named Sigmund Freud, who actually coined the term infantile amnesia in the late 19th century. Freud's theory was characteristically dark. He believed that the first few years of life were so filled with socially unacceptable impulses and traumatic realizations that the adult mind simply locked those memories away in an airtight vault to protect the rest of the personality. It was a case of psychological repression. According to this view, the memories are all still there, buried deep in your subconscious, influencing your phobias and your dreams, but kept under lock and key by a mental sentry. It was a compelling, cinematic idea that dominated the conversation for nearly a century. However, as modern neuroscience began to actually look at the physical architecture of the brain, the repression theory started to fall apart. If the memories were simply hidden, we should be able to find some trace of them under hypnosis or through neuroimaging, but the deeper we looked, the more it seemed like the vault itself was empty. Is it possible that the memories aren't being hidden from us, but were never actually finished in the first place? To find out, we have to investigate the hardware. For a long time, the leading scientific consensus was the blank slate hypothesis. This theory suggested that infants simply didn't have the cognitive equipment to form memories. The idea was that a baby's brain is like a computer that hasn't had an operating system installed yet. You can type on the keyboard all you want, but nothing is going to be saved to the hard drive because the save function doesn't exist. This sounds logical until you actually test a baby's memory. In the 1980s, a researcher named Carolyn Rovee Collier performed a now famous experiment that blew the blank slate theory out of the water. She took infants as young as 2 months old and tied a silk ribbon from their ankles to a colorful mobile hanging over their cribs. The babies quickly learned that if they kicked their legs, the mobile would move. They loved it. When she brought the babies back 24 hours later and tied them to the same mobile, they started kicking immediately. They remembered the lesson. 6-month-old babies could remember the trick for up to 2 weeks. This proved that the hardware for recording information is fully functional almost from birth. The save button is working perfectly. But if the brain is clearly capable of recording these moments, why is the hard drive being wiped clean every few years? This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive clues in the entire investigation, discovered by researchers Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. Their study, published in 2014, turned our understanding of brain growth on its head. We used to think that memory was lost because the brain wasn't growing fast enough. It turns out the exact opposite is true. We forget because the brain is growing too fast. This process is called neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons. In the first few years of life, your hippocampus, which is the brain's primary filing clerk for long-term memories, is a construction zone. It is churning out new neurons at a rate that will never be matched again in your life. This sounds like a good thing, but think of it like this. Imagine you are trying to organize a library, and you've spent all day carefully placing books on the shelves in a specific order. But every 10 minutes, a construction crew comes in and rips out the old shelves to install brand new, high-tech ones. In the process, they dump all your carefully organized books into a giant, messy pile on the floor. The new shelves are better and more efficient, but the old filing system has been destroyed. The Toronto study showed that this high rate of neurogenesis actually disrupts the existing circuits where early memories are stored. In their experiments with mice, when they slowed down the growth of new neurons, the infant mice actually kept their memories longer. When they sped up neuron growth in adult mice, the adults started suffering from the same kind of amnesia that babies do. Your brain was so busy upgrading its technology that it accidentally deleted the data from the previous version. Does it make sense to prioritize the power of the machine over the information it was built to hold? Even if the physical hardware is being rewired, that doesn't explain why some fragments of memory don't survive. This is where we encounter the language wall. In 2002, researchers Gabrielle Simcock and Harleen Hain conducted an experiment called the magic shrinking machine. They brought toddlers into a lab and showed them a large, colorful box that could shrink toys. The kids were fascinated. They watched the toys go in big and come out small. The researchers then waited a year and went to the children's homes to see what they remembered. Here is the catch. They tested the children's vocabulary at the time of the original experiment. What they found was incredible. The children could only remember and describe the parts of the event for which they had words a year earlier. If a child didn't know the word shrink or machine during the original event, they couldn't use those concepts to retrieve the memory later, even if they had learned the words in the meantime. It's as if memory is a library where the books are filed by their titles. If you don't have the words to give the book a title when you put it on the shelf, you have no way to look it up later. You might know that a book exists, you might even remember the color of the cover, but because it's not labeled, it stays lost in the stacks forever. Can we really claim to own our experiences if we don't have the vocabulary to describe them to ourselves? The mystery deepens when you realize that not every culture experiences this amnesia the same way. This clue comes from the work of psychologist Chi Wang at Cornell University, who has spent years studying how cultural differences shape our earliest memories. She found that, on average, American adults have their first memories from about 6 months earlier than adults in China. This doesn't seem like much, but in the world of developmental psychology, it's a massive gap. The reason appears to be rooted in the way parents talk to their children. In Western cultures, there is a heavy emphasis on elaborative reminiscing. Parents tend to ask their kids detailed questions about their day. What did you do at the park? Who did you see? How did that ice cream taste? This constant questioning acts like a training program for the brain. It teaches the child that their personal experiences are a story worth telling and provides them with a narrative structure to file those memories away. In cultures that place more value on collective history rather than individual narrative, children aren't prompted to save their personal stories as frequently. This suggests that memory isn't just a biological function, it's a social skill. You have to be taught how to remember. If no one ever asks you what happened, does your brain eventually decide that nothing important did? If we accept that the narrative is being deleted by growth and restricted by language, we still have to account for the ghosts in the system. This leads us to the distinction between explicit and implicit memory. Explicit memory is the kind we've been talking about, the ability to recall a specific time and place, like your 3rd birthday party or the name of your first dog. This is what infantile amnesia erases. But implicit memory is different. It is a procedural, emotional, and physical record of how the world works. It is the how rather than the what. You don't remember the day you learned that fire is hot, but your hand knows to pull away from a flame. You don't remember the specific instances of your parents comforting you when you were afraid, but your nervous system has remembered whether or not the world is a safe place. This is the verdict of the investigation. The memories aren't actually gone. They've just changed their state of matter. They've moved from being a story you can tell to being the very floor you are standing on. Your personality is essentially a collage of thousands of moments you can't recall. You are the result of a million tiny interactions that you will never see again. But if the person who experienced those moments is gone, who exactly is the person living in the aftermath? There is a final, unsettling piece of evidence that suggests even the few memories we think we have from that era are likely fakes. Memory is a highly reconstructive process. Every time you pull a memory out of the file, you aren't looking at the original document, you're looking at a photocopy of a photocopy. Over time, your brain starts to fill in the blurry parts with information from other sources. If your mother has told you a story about how you fell into the pool when you were 2, and you've seen a photo of yourself crying in a towel afterward, your brain will eventually take that story and that photo and weave them together into a memory. You will swear you can remember the coldness of the water and the smell of the chlorine, but research shows that you are likely just remembering the photo. In studies where researchers implanted entirely false memories into participants, like a fictional trip in a hot air balloon, about a third of the people eventually remembered the event in vivid detail. They described the wind in their hair and the view from the basket, even though they had never been in a balloon in their lives. This means that the very foundation of your identity is built on a mixture of biological deletion, social training, and accidental forgery. Is it possible that the real you only exists in the present, and the past is just a story we've agreed to stop questioning? We often think of memory as a record of our lives, a way to keep the past alive so we can learn from it and cherish it. But looking at the mechanics of infantile amnesia suggests a different, more practical purpose for the brain. The brain's job isn't to be a historian, its job is to be a survivalist. In those first few years, your brain is faced with the most difficult task it will ever perform. It has to learn how to be a human being. It has to learn how to interpret light into shapes, how to turn vibrations in the air into language, how to coordinate hundreds of muscles to take a single step. To do this, it needs maximum efficiency. It doesn't have time to store the metadata of when and where each lesson was learned. It just needs the lesson itself. The you that existed during that time was a prototype, a high-speed learning machine that had to be dismantled so that the final version of you could be built. The reason you can't remember being a baby is because the baby was the scaffolding, and you are the building. Once the building is finished, the scaffolding is no longer necessary, so it's taken away and discarded. It served its purpose perfectly, but it was never meant to be a permanent part of the structure. But if the scaffolding is what determined the shape of the building, shouldn't we be worried that we can't see it anymore? This brings us to the most chilling realization of the entire mystery. We like to believe we are in the driver's seat of our own lives, making choices based on our values and our experiences. But if our most foundational experiences happened in a black hole of amnesia, then we are being driven by forces we cannot see and cannot remember. A child who was neglected in the first 18 months of life may grow up to be an adult with a constant, background hum of anxiety that they can never quite explain. They might go to therapy for years, searching their memories for a cause, and find nothing. There is no scene to point to, no incident to resolve. The memory is implicit. It is baked into the way their heart beats and the way their adrenaline spikes. They are living in the wreckage of a storm they can't remember witnessing. On the flip side, the sense of security and confidence you feel today might be a gift from a version of you that died decades ago, a version that felt safe in the arms of someone whose face you can no longer conjure in your mind. We are all haunted houses, filled with the echoes of people we used to be, acting out scripts written in a language we have long since forgotten. If we are the product of things we can't remember, do we truly have any say in who we become? Think back one more time to that blue plastic rattle with the scratch on the handle. You don't remember the day you got it. You don't remember the day you lost it. You don't even remember the sound it made when you shook it with all your might. But that rattle, and the thousands of other objects and moments like it, are why you are who you are today. They were the raw materials used to forge your consciousness. The amnesia isn't a bug in the system, it's the price of admission. You had to forget your beginning so that you could have a middle and an end. You had to lose your childhood so that you could gain a self. It is a tragic trade-off, a silent agreement we all made before we were old enough to understand the terms. We are all walking around with a 3-year gap in our resumes, a blank space where our origin story should be. And while science can explain the how, the neurogenesis, the language walls, the cultural scaffolding, it can never quite soothe the why. There is a certain loneliness in knowing that the most important parts of you are things you will never know. Can we ever truly be whole if the bottom half of our soul is a mystery even to us? Perhaps the most startling evidence of this comes from the way we treat our own children. We spend thousands of hours reading to them, playing with them, and meticulously documenting every milestone in photo albums and digital clouds. We do this with a frantic energy, as if we are trying to anchor them to the earth. But deep down we know the truth. We know that they won't remember any of it. We are performing for an audience that is perpetually falling asleep and waking up as someone new. We are building a cathedral of memories for a person who will eventually walk out the front door and forget the floor plan. We do it anyway, not because the memories will last, but because the love will. The love becomes the implicit memory. It becomes the setting on the thermostat of their soul. They won't remember that you read them that specific book on that specific Tuesday, but they will grow up with the unshakable feeling that they are worth being listened to. The story is gone, but the feeling remains. Isn't it strange that the things that matter most are the things we are least likely to keep? This raises one final detective-style question. If you could have them back, would you want them? If a scientist offered you a pill that would instantly restore every single memory from the first 3 years of your life, every diaper change, every terrifying shadow on the wall, every moment of pure, unadulterated frustration before you knew how to use a spoon, would you take it? Most people's first instinct is to say yes. We crave completeness. We want to solve the mystery. But there is a reason the brain clears the cache. The intensity of being a new human is overwhelming. To remember the sheer, raw vulnerability of that time might be too much for an adult mind to bear. We need the filter of amnesia to function. We need the distance between who we were and who we are to maintain the illusion of a stable identity. The witness had to be removed from the scene so that the life could continue. If we remembered everything, would we ever be able to move forward, or would we be forever trapped in the sensory explosion of our own beginning? As we close this case, we have to look at the evidence one last time. We've looked at the repression of Freud, the biological hardware of the hippocampus, the explosive growth of neurogenesis, the scaffolding of language, and the social training of culture. Each of these is a different lens on the same fundamental truth. You are a masterpiece built on a foundation of disappearing ink. The first chapter of your life was written in a script that was designed to dissolve as soon as the second chapter began. You are the only person in the world who can't truly know your own story, and that is a profound, universal human experience. We are all detectives searching for a person who no longer exists, looking for clues in old photo albums and the stories of our elders. We are looking for ourselves in a room where the lights were never turned on. Is there anything more human than searching for a home you can't remember leaving? It all comes back to that one physical detail, the one that started this entire investigation. That blue plastic rattle with the tiny, jagged scratch on the handle. You can picture it now because I told you about it, but you don't actually remember it. You can't feel the weight of it in your hand or the texture of the plastic against your palm. That scratch was made by a version of you that is gone forever, a person who lived and breathed and felt things just as intensely as you do right now. That person isn't a memory, they are a ghost. And here is the chilling, definitive truth of the matter. You are not the person who made that scratch. You are just the person living in the house they built. You are the end result of a history you are forbidden from knowing, a walking consequence of a life you never actually got to keep. The mystery isn't where your memories went. The mystery is how you managed to become yourself without them. You are a stranger to your own beginning, and you always will be. If this dive into the black box of your own brain made you look at your past, or your children's future, a little differently, I'd love to hear about the earliest thing you think you remember. Is it a real memory, or is it a photo? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to keep exploring the strange architecture of the human experience, consider subscribing to the channel. There are plenty more mysteries to investigate, and I'd like to have you here for the next one. After all, someone has to keep the record. Thank you for watching.